Czechoslovakia ceases to exist by the end of 1992. The two countries, Czech Republic and Slovakia, partially rearmed themselves, changing some of their ex-Soviet arms to NATO standard equipment. Army size drops on both sides, but they still possess certain offensive capabilities. And in 2019, a hypothetical war breaks out between the two. No outside interference happens. It's neighbor versus neighbor, a war of brotherly nations. Who would win? And now it's Czechia versus Slovakia. The two land armies are on the face of it of similar size. Both feature two brigades as their main maneuver units, though Czech forces do have more personnel overall, mostly due to more battalions per brigade and a separate recon regiment. Starting locations of units is such that neither side would have a serious initial advantage in numbers near the border, though the Czech army could enjoy some minor territory gains if they press on the southern end of the border before the front stabilizes. Slovakia would have the eastern part of Tatra mountains slightly impeding the movements of some of their units. On the other hand, those same mountains would come in handy to stop the Czech incursions as well. But Tatras aren't some huge tall mountain chain. There are but a few areas in the way where they reach over 1,000 meters. Most of the country's topography is fairly flat, especially for Czechia. Other major obstacles for either side would be rivers, but those two aren't very wide. River Vag is perhaps the most pertinent. It's fairly close to the border and could help protect Slovakia, but it was separated into a canal and the river for most of its length, making each of them separately more narrow than the river would otherwise be. The width would at many places be enough for engineers to quickly place a mobile bridge over it. On the Czech side, there is the Morava River. It's quite a bit wider and would present a significant obstacle to Slovakian troops. But would Slovakia even try and go into Czechia? Probably not. Besides the initial Czech numbers at the border being slightly higher, there would be other units trickling in. It is safe to say Czechia would be able to amass more troops at the border more quickly than Slovakia, possibly to leave only a few battalions to guard the northern border over the mountains and to concentrate all of the remaining units for a push south, where the goal might be to cut off Slovakian largest city, Bratislava. Though another natural defense barrier would be in the way: Little Carpathians. They're not a high mountain range, but their hills are thickly covered with forest. Rushes with large motorized formations would be hard to do, especially with Slovakian defenders. While the war on the ground might slow down due to geographical features, the war in the air would rage from the opening moments of the conflict. Both sides use a similar number of bases, though the Czech Air Force is more numerous. While the Slovaks use old MiG-29s that technologically date to the Cold War, the Czech use fairly modern Gripen fighters. Two-seater MiGs lack radar, making them less relevant. And even the rest of Slovakian MiGs only have old long-range air-to-air missiles. If Slovakians try to go over Czech-controlled territory, there would be the added issue of air defenses. Old Kup-SAM systems would still be a fair threat to old MiGs. Czech side could also count on some light attack planes. While they can carry short-range air-to-air missiles and they have a radar, they are subsonic, and they are best used as ground attack planes. Czechs also have some attack helicopters for fire support, a category Slovakia lacks entirely. Slovakian Air Force is basically there only for air interception. Their aircraft can't carry any guided air-to-ground weapons. The Czech side does have a small stockpile of guided weapons and targeting pods. Realistically, that's not enough for a large protracted war, and soon enough the Czechs too would resort to unguided bombs. But they do have more planes capable of bomb delivery, and targeting pods would come in very handy. Biggest issue preventing the Czechs from attaining air control would be Slovakian air defenses. They're more numerous than Czech ones and more capable when it comes to long-range systems. While Kups are fairly old, the S-300 is 80s technology and could still endanger the Czech Gripens, as those lack the support of decoys and heavy jamming that Allied planes had in recent NATO air campaigns. Also, Igla manpads are modern enough to threaten any low and slow flyer. By the end of the war in the skies, which Czechs would likely win, neither side would have enough planes remaining to seriously take advantage of control of the air. But some air support for the Czechs would happen. Slovakians would have to keep their artillery and tanks safe from the airstrikes as well, and they don't have that many to begin with. The two sides have roughly the same number of tanks. While the M1 model is a Cold War relic, the Czech M4 is a recent modernization. A new engine and targeting system does make it more effective. Artillery-wise, the Czechs are also slightly ahead. With fewer air threats to worry about and supportive counter-battery radars that they have, the Czech artillery would likely be more effective. When it comes to rest of the armored vehicles, Slovakia has more of them in active service, though they're not very modern nor capable. The BVP is a license-made Soviet BMP infantry fighting vehicle. When all the reserves are put into action, it's unlikely Slovaks would outnumber their enemies. As the war rages on, both sides would mobilize. First, the organized reserve would come in. Slovakia has a smaller trained reserve, though Czech one isn't very large either. Mobilization of general population would play a large role, and Czechia is almost double in size population-wise. The difference in size of economy is even bigger. That advantage in economy naturally lets Czechia have the more modern and somewhat bigger force, as we saw. The defense budget comparison is thus no surprise. In the end, Slovaks couldn't do much offensively. They would have to hold to their mountain defenses. But over time, the Czech numbers and even limited control of the air would yield results. The Little Carpathians would eventually be crossed, and from then on it's mostly flat fields, with southern part of River Vag being the next line of defense for Slovakia. Bratislava would eventually get cut off, though likely not fully encircled due to its proximity to Austrian border, so basic necessities might still be reaching the Slovak capital. Czech aerial recon edge would also help them dictate the pace of the war, as would the better mobility through their airlift assets. Some very limited Czech aerial incursions over the rivers to help with securing the river crossings might successfully happen. If the time allows and if the Czechs would withstand the greater casualties while pressing into urban areas around Bratislava and breaching the rivers, the front could move even farther east, possibly all the way to the second big river obstacle in Slovakia, the river Hron. And of course, the northern mountainous region would hardly be worth the casualties, so it's likely the Czechs would be content not to go too deeply in that direction. Still, without the most of the flatlands of Slovakia and its largest city on the brink of collapse, Slovakia would clearly be on the losing side here. And remember, Binkov may talk about hypothetical wars, but only real peace can bring us all together.